Bingo Baringo. How the heck are ya? Well, back at it with another record. Look at that, cleaned up the desktop. So, was going to take a break, but I'm on a roll today. Realized I didn't have any food, needed to order dinner, so I've got some time. Well, I have food, but it's just going to take a while to cook. In any event, I want to talk about generative art. In my last video, I talked about how to create layers for Photoshop and what generative art, yeah, well, not really what generative art was, but kind of touching on it. So right now, I'll give you a little insight on what generative art is, how to get started, and that reminds me, actually, we'll do that when we get there. Um, where you can find some resources. Yeah, obviously, I'm going to plug my own stuff, so maybe you could take a look at this article. You can take a look at my cool pal here, Gang Prompter. He's got some really awesome generative works, but you'll get a look at the history, where it came from, Dadaism, some of the early pioneers, Max Spence and some of the work that he was doing. And you'll understand, how this work was being created, where it came from, originated in military laboratories as ways to experiment. And you can see a full list of different types of artists, some work that was done with plotters, different types of resources, languages, graphic software and generators, etc., books and different stuff that you can get into. But as I was saying, yeah, it was being used as a way to kind of experiment with, how visuals are perceived, and if there was a way to predict um, how those visuals were perceived, how the image might be constructed. You can look at Dadaism. There's always political attachments to things. In this article, how to create an NFT step by step, I really go into a more in-depth process on what an NFT is. I kind of touch on generative art from a randomization aspect, a quick little video, some information about layers, and then the more in-depth process on how I created the work here for this particular collection that I'm going over. But, excuse me, what I want to go over is the basis of generative art and what they're talking about in terms of randomization. Um, and we'll use this one as an example, and just some other types of generative art that you can get into with really a low barrier to entry, and that you can start to experiment with, because I think it's a lot of fun. And I think people would really enjoy that. So what I'll do here is, let's just go ahead and let me see if I can find the Photoshop file. Shoot, me good. Where did I put it? Is it this one? I can't believe this. That's oh, because I have everything turned off. Yeah. So if you have paid attention to other videos, I applaud you. If you haven't, no big deal. In other videos, I've shown how I create layers for Photoshop files to create artworks for NFTs. Excuse me, what the fuck? And in this here, you can see that I followed a similar pattern, right? I knew that there was a set of constraints that I was going to use. In this case, colors. I had one texture that I wanted to use, and I had an element that I wanted to experiment with, and a shadow element, right? So all of these were used to create the outputs, and those outputs were used to create the juxtaposition. So I'm not going to get into the specifics here. Yeah, you can do that on your own. Let me close this. Why that's important is because in a randomizer like Hashlips, it relies heavily on the outputs, and those outputs need to be in the appropriate folders, and those appropriate folders or directories need to be labeled, corresponding to the config file. And we'll jump over to that in a second. But what that means is that, for example, I have all these solid colored background PNG files, right, in a folder labeled background. I have a bunch of solid, well, not solid, but gradiated circles on a transparent background in a folder called ovals. Now I have, a rose with a shadow and a color treatment on a transparent background as well. And then I have this overlaying texture, or underlaying, depends, right? And I'll tell you. These are the main layer folders that are going to make up the generation. In this configuration file, that's where I'll be setting um, how those outputs are going to happen. So for myself, I misunderstood early on, and this is one of the earlier versions of Hashlips, and I never got the randomization to work properly, right? So it does work in the uniqueness, but there is a way that you can set the ratio of how much a certain item would be output. For simplicity's sake, and this was an experimentation, I only output 66 variations. I just left it like that. And what I was referring to is this key here for rarity. I was never able to actually get it to work the way it was supposed to, and I never really went back because it was just an experiment. But what happens, and if you remember those layer folders, you know, here's background, here's ovals, here's rosé, and here's texture, right? Those layer folders will pull from here based on a ratio, a weighting, and in the new one you put it in the file name. And it will then output it in a form of rarity scale, and that's how you can get these unique variations. So, you know, I have here, well, we have it right here too. What you're going to end up walking away with is all these PNGs, these different variations, and you're also going to have the metadata for, oh, I don't know what had happened for those particular ones, right? In other versions, I'm not particularly sure why I'm missing the metadata here, but I would have meta for each individual one, and it would contain this particular info. It's possible I deleted it and, you know, didn't do a good job checking beforehand, but I'll show you here just so I'm not lying to you. In War Skulls, I used the most up-to-date one, and here you can see the JSON output for each particular skull, the URI, you know, the collection, the information, and the actual, well, that's number two, the actual image. I talked about War Skulls and stuff. I'm not going to jump into it, but just so you know, this was the newer version. But anyways, so in this config file, that's where you do these configurations. That's how you set up the different outputs, and that's that's the fucking metadata, Dean. And that's how you set everything up. So I'd be curious to see if this works. I'd like to get, I'd like to even see, just for example. Hey, all right, it failed. I'm not gonna, well, it should have been installed, but I haven't used it. Oh. So you will run into shit like this. I'm no wizard. I always try to fumble my way through. I definitely try to figure it out if I'm not going to figure it out. Why? I thought that was the command. Then I just move. Well, I'm going to move on because I don't want to waste your time. But what would have happened was a script would have ran. That script would have ran, and it would have started pulling from that folder, and then it would have built, and we would have walked away with stuff like this. So that's randomization. That is a form of generative art that is created by creating layers. I have other videos on how to create those layers. Hashlips, I'll link to in the description where you can get his generator. He created a great way. It's an awesome way to get started, and it's a real good exposure to generative art. There's definitely probably other stuff that you can look into, but that's probably point A. Really easy to understand. And you'll see, look, you'll probably run into shit, and we could probably sit here and it's probably super easy, and there's probably engineers that are like, you know, you could figure this out really simply, but we're not going to do that right now because that's not what we're doing. So that's that form of generative art, then we can pop up over here to the old collab. Where you at, Cuzzo? I like it when it just does it. And we can play around with this pal, the VQGAN clip. I will put all the information in the description of this video so you can do it, you can repeat it, and I will obviously point to the assets and resources. This is really cool. You know, this is using, what are they called? Generative adversarial networks, neural networks, machine learning, data sets. What it's doing is it takes these data sets, these images, and based on inputs and prompts, it will look at what's being put into it, and then it will learn over time how to create that image. And what I found really interesting about this is how it's used in video games and how they can create actual scenes and stuff. So this is pretty fascinating, and it doesn't take long, and hopefully there won't be any errors when I fire it up. So I'll fire it up. My friend Funky Jamma, real homie from back in college, put me onto this. There's a lot of really awesome artists, who do work with these kinds of things. So I use Google Colab Pro. It's $9 or $10, but you can pay $50 if you want. The free version will work. Understand you'll be throttled in this essence. It will take a long time to really get the true power out of these bad mamma jammas. People are running machines for days at a time. People have dedicated machines. People actually train artwork. I'm particularly curious about training my own data sets, but I'm just getting into this, and I realize that Python is a new language that I need to kind of at least learn a little bit about if I want to start doing that. But if there's any engineers or Python professionals that are seeing this and they're curious to collaborate, I would love to link up. You can find me on the internet, Dane Wasalko, all that stuff, Twitter, Instagram. I'm fascinated by these things, even if we are training the cyborgs. So that's loading for a little bit. Might take a little while. I'm going to turn some of these off so this next part will load quick, and I'll tell you what those are going to be. Sick. So these are the data sets. These are basically directories of images, right? This one we're going to leave on is pretty much all the images on the internet. These are some of the images, I found out WikiArt, there's these massive public domain sets of images. There's faces, obviously. Where is this one? This is from like all of Flickr. And I've turned all the other ones off because sometimes they take a long time, and for brevity, I just want to jump into this. And ImageNet 1638.4 usually fires up pretty quick. You'll see the virtual machines, which if you don't know what a virtual machine is, it's basically a digital replica of a physical computer. They'll fire up, they'll start running in the background. That's what this right here. If anybody knows what NVIDIA is, those are graphics cards, and we're pretty much using a virtual instance of that. As far as I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not the back-end guy. I just try to be as friendly with the back-end guys as possible. I remember working with some folks in fintech. They're really passionate about Ruby and Elixir. Come on, speed it up. And I was exposed to object-oriented programming, and it made a lot of sense to me. So that's kind of why, for me, this stuff is cool, because I've been exposed to different programming languages that are pretty familiar. Cool. So, fired up. You don't have to hear my bullshit anymore. You don't have to hear what's going on there. That's going to fire up right quick, and you can see in the frame this bad memo jammo right here. Oop, I didn't mean to do that, but it's done. When I say that we're going to take text and turn it into an image, we're literally going to take text and turn it into an image. So I'm going to fire off the first things that come to my mind, right? Red, Porsche, abstract, right? Red Porsche abstract. I was thinking about Porsches earlier, and because I know how this thing works already, abstract usually produces some results, and I really want you to see stuff. I'm going to change this to 10. The image interval, well, Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. It won't take long. We'll go back to 25. Image interval is the amount of times this machine will output an image. And what that means is it'll take this seed phrase, it will run it through the processing engine, it will learn, it will output an image, and it will do that over and over and over again. And we could set it to 1 if we want to and literally see every other one. What happens is there's not a lot of variation at that point. I'm sure there's purpose, as there usually is. However, for this, I want us to be able to see some change pretty quickly, and I don't want it to take too long. For experimentation purposes, we don't have to worry too much about the rest of this. 500 by 500, you could leave that size the way it is. There is an expander down below, and that's a whole nother topic of machine learning and generative art, but you can learn that beyond this. So we're going to hit play. That's ready to rock in a Rizzle. And this is what's going to happen. So when I hit play, so I have something just left in the queue from when I was experimenting. I was actually showing my parents this over the holiday. They were getting excited, and they kept having me like run stuff through, and we were trying stuff. So you see this here. This is a seed image. This is the first one. This is 0. This is Aleph. This is, what happens when a spark of an idea, and this is the machine replicating that instance. So right now, that's going to disappear when I hit play. It's going to take everything, and process it. It's going to run it through its scenario. It's going to feed that information into the system, pretty much, the way you would an idea, right? Somebody says something to you, you process that information, all of a sudden that information becomes a thought, a thing, an idea. That there pops out into some sort of a visualization, which that visualization in this format is this goobly gop right here. Pretty weird, pretty interesting. So after it thinks about this thing for, the next 25 moments of its lifetime, if you will, it's going to run through a bunch of different scenes and scenarios. It's going to look at a bunch of different things that are related to, what we put in. And the first things that came to my mind were, remember, red Porsche abstract. It needs to learn as fast as it possible to produce, to output. So that's where the training aspect comes in, and that's where these dudes are running stuff. Well, and girls, I shouldn't say dudes. It's just kind of the way we say, like, stuff down here in Florida. Look, there it is. So it took the color red, it took Porsche and abstract, and it produced a textured image. We now have a randomly generated background, honestly, that could be used if you're crafty. If you're a creative, I could see you coming in here and using these prompts and outputting a whole bunch of just textures and backgrounds and whatever, and getting, all sorts of stuff. And as you can see, this is going to go through every 25th iteration and produce something. I'll let it run for a few and see if we can't get any type of a shape. Sometimes it actually does take shape, and it does start to recognize other. You'll see maybe if it will actually start to build a Porsche. But no, it's taking the texture of the. It looks like it's going to try to take the texture of the car. It's going to actually try to take what looks like lights, because you can start to see the trailing of the lights. So I'll let it go for a few more before I move on to another topic that I want to show you with generative art. So, it's pretty cool. You can do a lot with it. Actually, who cares at this point? Let's just turn it off and go to the next part. So that's that. I said before we move on there, you can increase the size of the image. You run it through, you got to turn these bad boys on, and it will pretty much double or triple the size if you want. But you could experiment with this. You can put all the different things you want inside of it and tell it to do, whatever you want it to do. This is a type of generative art. You can combine this type of generative art with the randomizer that I showed you, if you output this and put this into Photoshop, throw some masks around it, maybe create a collage of a bunch of stuff. I don't know. You can do a whole ton of it with it. This thing here, this is really cool. You could also have a lot of fun with this bad mama jamma, and I will put all the links in the description so you don't have to worry. You could learn. And this is a style transfer, and style transfer is really neat because you can create some interessante visuals pretty quick. So same aspect applies. We got to turn stuff on. Let's pray that we don't run into any errors because I'm not trying to be a debugger right now. I just want everything to run smoothly, please, Lord. Just one thing in my life to go right. And it looks like it's happening. Oh, damn. Now I got that song stuck in my head. Tiptoe to the window. Anyway, this is another form of generative art. It is a style transfer. What it's going to do is going to take an image we are feeding into the machine, and based on a series of prompts, it will output a different style. This one is pretty fun and flexible. We'll need to pull an image from the internet. I have not figured out, and what that really means is I haven't taken the time to see how to change where you could feed the source from. Again, if there's any engineers or developers that are watching this and you guys want to link up on stuff, please reach out. Dane Wasalko on the internet. Excuse me, I get excited by these majestical things, especially when they work, but there's a lot of possibilities. I don't know if you saw, I had another one that involved music, which I haven't been able to get into just quite yet. So, things take a little while to fire up. They're much faster with Collab Pro. They obviously get faster the more you pay, naturally, right? You pay for convenience. Oh, shit. That's what it was. I forgot I ordered food. Cool. That means maybe it might be here. No worries. We're almost done, pending that this will do its thing. Chicken wing. So it's fired up. Perfect. That's what that was. I thought my neighbors... No, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe I was being annoying. Oh, no, please. Let's pretend it was okay. I'm just testing. Just want to make sure it runs. I don't remember what I did last time. Oh, cool. I have an image already. Perfect. So, ironically, there's a rose already there. Fingers crossed that this works. And we can just go on and I can show you. If it doesn't work, not an issue because I probably have something output. Anyways, yeah. Well, if it doesn't work and if it does get cleared out before I can show you, you can see how I took this image here. Pink rose, turquoise background, lots of noise, black shadow, and it output this entirely different style of arte. Okay? Right? Go ahead and you can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different styles, and you can turn 4. You can turn them on and off by just commenting the code in and out, like so. And let's see if it works. Maybe we keep all finger crawls. All right. Here we go, one more time. Everybody feeling fine. Here we go now. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Feeling fine. We're gonna get the candy, the cotton candy baby. That's what I call her. Everybody feeling fine. Here we go now. Here we go, everybody. Here we go. Take your time. Don't rush. I'll be here when you're done. Just gonna wait on this son of a gun. You know what I am excited about? I'm excited about that upside down pineapple cheesecake. I got Cheesecake Factory. Lazy. Meatloaf. So, I guess I won't talk shit for a little bit, and I'll tell you that on the first run, It takes a while, but once the machines are learned and they're fired up, it pops it out. So here you go, bada bing, bada boom. We created a generative art together. We took this image, we told the machine to output in this style a new art. And because I'm not a liar and I tell the truth, here you go. It should fire up and just pop it out. Boom. Excelente. Well, why don't I do it for everyone since I'm inclusive and not exclusive? See, this one's my favorite. So what I could see happening with people doing is experimenting with all of these different techniques, using all of the generators to produce some form or some aspect of the artwork and output them, um, and then combine them, right? For example, and I will do this in another tutorial. Ooh, this is not the right one. Soon, I'm going to do this in a tutorial for Adobe Illustrator. But my idea here is I've created these shapes, which are going to be masks. Here's the sketch of how I plan on breaking down this. I don't know the shortcuts anymore. Breaking down this artwork and how I see it coming together. And then, ooh, wow, we're so fucking spacey. And then we have this stylized art that I kind of want to follow. So what I see happening in that aspect is I see myself pulling different things from the different generators and using those shapes in Illustrator to create masks, to create layers to output, and I'll do a tutorial. But that's enough of my bullshit. Have a nice night. I'm going to eat my meatloaf and cheesecake. Peace and love.